Blessed Creator, we are thankful for your presence that has enraptured us. We thank you for your grace that stands with us. And we thank you for mercy that eternally sustains us. It is because of all of this that we have not been consumed. For we stand now not because of the strength of our own will, but we stand simply because of glory divine. And so as you are God, we give you glory, not because of what you've done, but simply because of who you are. Spirit of the living God, fall fresh on us. Spirit of the living God, fall fresh on us. Spirit of the living God, fall fresh on us. And so we hasten ourselves before your presence, ever so careful to give you all the glory, the praise, and the honor that is due you. Unto that God whose name is too sacred to ever be spoken, but eternally adored. Them that love the Lord declared in concert. Amen. To the presence of our God, to our friend and brother, to Pastor Matthews, can we thank God for him all? St. Luke, you are blessed with a most unique pastor. I don't say that lightly. He is a most unique pastor. He is a black preacher who has no issue, he does it unapologetically, to do the work of liberty theology in a place that is not popular. And in this hour, in this season in the church, it is most difficult to find African American churches that believe in the beloved community. We preach it, but we don't do it. And so to find a pastor who understands a sense of theological pragmatism, it is something that you ought to be so proud of and so thankful for. I believe that if we had more preachers who stood in sound biblical scholarship, that we would not have so much and so many tragedies within our nation and amongst those who live within the African American community. And so we thank you to all of the other clergy and to the St. Luke people. We greet you. Good morning. It is in the First Testament that we find our text, in the book of Job. Job chapter 23. Would you be so kind to indulge me by standing? Job 23. Beginning in verse 1. Then Job answered, today also my complaint is bitter. His hand is heavy despite my groaning. Oh, that I knew where I might find him, that I might come even to his dwelling. I would lay my case before him and fill my mouth with arguments. I would learn what he would answer me and understand what he would say to me. Would he contend with me in the greatness of his power? No, but he would give heed to me. There an upright person could reason with him, I should be acquitted forever by my judge. If I go forward, he is not there, or backward, I cannot perceive him. On the left he hides, and I cannot behold him. I turn to the right, but I cannot see him. But he knows the way that I take. Yeah. When he has tested me, I shall come like gold. You may be seated in praise. All right. I want to talk about in search of some answers. All right. In search of some answers. Yeah. I think all of us come to a place of great perplexity within the human journey, where we have been brutalized, scrutinized, perhaps demoralized, dehumanized. And in all of that, we want to find some answers that make sense. Or even if they don't make sense to us, at least we'll know why we're where we are and why we endure the way that we endure. Life is perplexing. It can cause us to bleed in heart, grow frustrated in mind, so much so that you can wave the white flag of surrender and say there's no reason to keep on trying to go on. Some things just simply don't make sense to me. And when they don't make sense, a person who is one who understands reflection and also introspection realizes that when I cannot find answers in and of myself, there has to be some profound, there has to be some full, there has to be some critical search for something that can give life and light to the midst of darkness and confusion. Everyone, doesn't matter whether you're black or whether you're white, although those of us who are descendant of the African diaspora perhaps feel as though some days we have a monopoly on hurt, pain, and frustration. We need and we desire to try to find out, does God really care? Because if you've ever been in a rut, or if you've ever been in a fix, it is easy sometimes to conclude that God must not care about us. If you just look back within the historical record, after 256 years of American slavery, perhaps one could ask the question, does God care? After Jim Crow South, one could possibly ask the question, does God care? After the Civil Rights Movement, somebody could possibly ask the question, does God even care? After Trayvon, innocent blood being spilled and crying out from the earth, somebody could possibly ask the question, does God even care? After Tamir Rice, innocent blood being spilled upon the earth, seemingly no vindication for those who have died unjustly, somebody could raise the question, does God even care? After shootings in Louisiana, somebody could ask the question, after all of this spilled blood here in the 21st century that is crying out to eternity, and seemingly eternity has gone on vacation, there is a voice crying out to the earth saying that I don't have anything to say to you now. And perhaps as we pray back, we're saying, God, are you concerned about a people who have gone through so much, who have learned how to make so much out of so little? And sometimes we felt as though we were truly the chosen because we learned how to make something out of absolutely nothing. And after all of that, we still have to raise the question, does God care? We heard that we were made in your image, shapen in your likeness. You took Zoe, breathed into flesh, and man becomes a living nephesh, a living soul. We walk in your light. But in all of that, for those in whom you say you love, some days we feel as though you do us mighty dirty.
does heaven really care? Perhaps you've come up in such a traditional orthodox theology that someone told you that you don't question God. You don't ask the question why. But perhaps if that is your testimony, you are much more spiritual than I. Because I have to ask God sometimes, what in the world are you thinking? I have to ask God sometime, why would you do somebody so bad that didn't ask to be here? I didn't choose my mama and I didn't choose my daddy. I didn't ask for my community and I didn't ask for my plight. I came into a world knowing nothing about it before I got here, and you had the sheer audacity and the unmitigated gall to write the manuscript of my life and the agenda for me and not ask me any question. It seems as if that you made some type of alliance with darkness and didn't ask me how I felt about it. I would have been okay if perhaps you would have sent a memorandum earlier. I perhaps could have dealt with tragedy a little bit better if you would have sent me a divine email a day or two before you hit me and caused me to fall down on the ground. I perhaps could have had a little better grip of reality if you would have just written me a note, even if it was by snail mail, to say, heaven loves you, but today you won't feel like it. But why would you treat someone so bad that was supposedly made in your image and shapen in your likeness? You know, that's how we can poise it. That's how we can declare it. That's how we can pray it when it seems as though the world that we live in is crumbling right in front of our faces. Some people believe that it's even easier to have such a testimony if you've come into a world and you've never had anything to start off with. But it even gets a little bit worse than when you've come out of one tragedy, when you've come through one phase of turmoil and you've gotten your feet halfway planted, things are halfway going fairly well, and all of a sudden, in a twinkling of an eye. That's why you can never become complacent in the state that you're in. Because even when things seem rather good right now, I need to tell you that night will transition into morning. But if you live through the day, night will surely come again. Some of us have grown so comfortable in the fact that we've gotten to the light that we've forgotten about the fact that if you make it through this, there's some darkness that surely is ahead. Life and our experience with God is transition. And you have to realize that even amidst human tragedy, it calls for divine answers and intervention. For one whom has been grounded in the very base of God's power is one that understands that heaven has to respond to human concerns. Why? Because not only was I made and shapen in the likeness of God, but the fact that I live in the shadow of God requires that heaven intervenes amidst divine circumstance. Subspatio aeternitate, under the light of eternity we all live. And so in my brokenness and amidst my tragedy, it is my right, not just my privilege, but it is my right, that amidst my human tragedy, I can petition heaven and go and tell God, you have a responsibility to tell me something about this. How do I know? Because heaven has made a contractual agreement with earth. If you made me and you didn't ask me about anything before you made me, that means because you said I'm yours, that means that you have to take care of me. You can't be a baby dad. You have to pay your child support. You have to take care of what you made. And so the journey that we endure now, where we see spilled blood and it seems to be no answers, where we see economic lack and we see that inflation keeps going up, but there is no balance in terms terms of the wage, when we see that the political arena does not give answers, and we see that the church has lost sight of its place, when we look for legislature to give answers to human problems rather than to understand that it is the role of the church to give the answers to the human problem and to human condition. But in the midst of topsy-turvy circumstance, we have a right to petition God. If you don't believe it, Job does it. Job is that person that in chapter 1 says that there was a man by the name of Job who came from the land of Uz, who was blameless, who lived upright, eschewed evil. He went away from that which he should not do. He had 7 sons, he had 3 daughters, he was rich too. 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camel, 500 donkey, 500 oxen. But with all of that, guess what? The devil had an interesting trick up his sleeve. And it seems as if God was in alliance with the enemy's plan. They had a meeting without sending Job an invitation. They were sneaky church folk. They had a meeting and did not send Job an invitation. They said, with all of this, we know that you love people to praise you because you're a jealous God. But in all of this, have you thought that if we have an agreement, let's see what happens. If you can find someone who is upright, just all of that you've been good to, let us mess with them a little while and let's see how they worship you then. He says, he puts me up on the butcher's block. Sometimes it feels as though God has put us up on the butcher's block. Have you considered Job? Have you considered this one? He's good, he's upright, he's just, he has some wealth, and says you can do whatever you want to do with him, but you can't take his life. You can beat him, you can cuss him, you can cut him, you can put him in sheer poverty, you can take whatever he has, but you have to let him live. That doesn't seem like the best agreement to me, because sometimes you can go through so much that you can petition heaven and say that I would rather die than have to go through this. You are letting me stay in the fire and be burned without giving me any analgesics to help soothe my pain, and you would allow the enemy to keep on picking and picking and picking, taking me through this and taking me through that. Yes, do that. And look at the plot. It does not just appear that he allows the enemy to mess with Job, but he allows the enemy to mess with that which is closest to Job. Sometimes the worst hurt is not the things that are inflicted upon you, but the worst hurt are the things that we see those in whom we love most go through. If you want to get to the core in the depth of someone, touch those things that they love the most. If you cut their children, that's going to provoke them to anger. If you take the things that they treasure, that's going to cause them to rise up. Where is a man's heart? Find out where his treasure is. Well, 7 sons, 3 daughters, afternoon picnic at somebody else's house, storm comes up, children die. Look at Job, stands here. In the midst of this, there is even a second meeting on the part of eternity and damnation, or as it relates to Job, saying, have you considered Job? Try him again. He passed the first test, do it again. Why would a God who loves me so much keep on allowing the devil to come in and keep on picking with me? You stripped me of the thing that I love more than my money. You took my children. And now with all of that, Job comes to a place and a plight that his 7,000 sheep, his 3,000 camel, his oxen and his donkeys, his wealth, the things that give him social status are taken away. But now the enemy comes in to intervene on his health. I can't stand. I can't breathe. I'm looking in the mirror and I don't like the person I see looking back at me. And now it says that Job is in such a state that he gets himself and positions himself in a bed of ashes and begins to scrape the very flesh from his body. Look, his wife, that's how you do it. Get the one who lays beside him. the one who has loved him with the 7 sons and the 3 daughters, but also the one who has made love to him, who knows his external, but also knows his internal. Now pervert her mind. Pervert her mind and say, Job, I know you've been praising, I know you've been worshiping, and I know you love this one that you call God, but look at yourself. He's taken our 7 sons, taken our 3 daughters. Look at yourself. You don't got no money. You can't buy me anything to adorn me. You can't send me any flowers to console me. You can't make me feel any better about the fact that we've gone bankrupt. And in all of the things that have happened to us, you have the nerve to sit in your ash pile, scrape the skin from your bone, but in the midst of it, you still are talking about a God who loves you. That don't sound like love to me, because somebody says that love don't hurt. What a lie was ever told. The greatest love, if there is ever profound love, it also will come with profound hurt. Any relationship that has not endured testing is not a relationship at all. And some of us have endured great pain and great tragedy, and we have rebuked God, failing to realize that if we cannot endure issues and circumstances where God smacks us, where God almost kills us, where God causes our very hearts to be placed in front of us, and where our tears roll down our cheeks, guess what? We have not endured, and we have not embraced the fullness of God's power yet. It is when God has hurt us the most that when God truly stands up to show us the greatest expression of divine love. But I can understand how this can cause a mind to grow so perplexed that we disconnect ourselves from how eternity connects with humanity. Because we see in the Bereshit, the book of Genesis, that God creates everything. He puts us in it, and he gives us the mandate, you take care of it. He gives us grassy fields, and he gives us still and tranquil waters to quench our thirst as we endure life's journey. But in all of that, we still see that the same Spirit that leads us in green pastures and leads us beside still waters is that same Spirit that takes us not only to the brink of the valley, but the same very Spirit that drops us off in the valley. That is a loving relationship, even though when we juxtapose it, it seems oxymoronic. How can you love me, but you also abuse me? How can you love me, but you also tear me down? How can you love me, but you also break me? How can you love me when you give me tables of plenty some days, but some days you cause my tongue to dry up right in my mouth? How can you love me when one moment you're holding me, in the next moment you're rebuking me? How can you love me when one moment you're lifting me up, and in the next moment you're dropping me down? How can you love me when you tell me that I'm your own and you hasten me to come to your presence, but the next moment you rebuke me out of your eternal glory? How can you love me? Sometimes I have to pull on you, and I have to cause you to be in this place of eternal tug of war so you can understand what the full power of love really looks like. I know you got some questions, and I know you want to know. I know you got some questions because you cannot understand how God is putting you through this human tug of war, this human roller coaster ride, this human aching and breaking. I know you got some questions. You got some questions not only of yourself, but you got some questions for me. You got some questions not only for me, but you got some questions of me because you need some answers from me, not only to make you feel better about your situation. You want to tell those around you who are looking at you die right in front of them, you want to give them some answers. You don't want to rebuke the God that you've been with so long, because if you rebuke the God that you've been with so long, that means that all this time you have been holding on to a God who is a liar. If God is a liar, that means that everything up until now has been lies that have come out of your mouth. That means that the earth is not the Lord's and the fullness thereof. That means the world and they that dwell therein. That means that God had not founded upon the sea and established it upon the flood. That means that anybody can exceed and extend themselves into the hill of the Lord and can stand in that holy place. That means nobody has to have clean hands and a pure heart. That means nobody has to worry about lifting up their hands to vanity nor swearing deceitfully. But Job says, I've been with God too long. Because I've been with God this long, I got some questions. But before I get to the place of question, I have to rebuke some people on the journey. On the journey, I have to tell this woman, shall we only take good of God and we shall not take bad? Because I know it feels good to feel good. But guess what? If I only take good of God, I only understand one side of God, but I do not understand the multiplicity of God's nature. That means that sometimes God presents God's self in a way that is freeing and tranquil. Sometimes God presents God's self in a way that is ugly and even sometimes feels as if it's demeaning. And sometimes God will even present God's self in a way that is beyond my ability to describe it. God has to always keep on moving in such a way that is beyond human understanding. Because God has to stand upon the plateau to be God, while I keep on standing in a place where I'm always going to be human. Let God be God. Let flesh be flesh. Job even is rebuked by friends. Say, Job, what's your problem? Say, you must have done something bad, because God would not do you like this unless there's some stuff that you got in your closet that you haven't exposed to the rest of us. Maybe that's why God is messing with you like this. Because although you have appeared so righteous to us, maybe in the darkness of your home life, you've been doing some stuff that's a little bit shady. Well, in the transition, Job says to us, Job speaks to us from the pages of antiquity and says that we have a right to go into the very presence of God. But look at the confusion of Job as Job prepares himself like a well-trained attorney. He says that I prepared my argument. I'm not going in the presence in arrogance. I prepared my argument. I want to know why you give me all of this, but you took it away. I want to know why you've taken this woman who I've loved so near and I've loved so dear. I've taken care of her so many years, and I took care of my family. And that very woman who was supposed to hold me up in my bad time, hold me through my frustration, love me through my pain, endure the affliction with me, has now turned on me like an evil seductress and said, why don't you curse your God and die? I need some answers. I need an answer because I've asked everybody else, and they look just as confused and just as foolish as I do. Have you ever looked for someone to give you an answer to your problem, and you only came to discover that they were just as disturbed, just as foolish, just as messed up in mind and spirit as you? Why? Because if they did not make it, they cannot fix it. That is the very core of the human condition. We keep on trying to fix what we did not make. And as long as we keep on trying to fix what we did not make, rather than to build up ladders to eternity by which God can connect with us and we connect with God, we only keep on building our own pseudo-gods, false idols of our own gold and our own wood that make us feel good in times of plenty, but in times in which we are in the midst of lack, it gives us no fuel to motivate ourselves to keep on going on even though we don't feel like walking. That's the state of the human predicament. But I have something I need to say to God. God may not even like what I have to say to God today, but I'm going to say it anyway. I want God to stand up and be God. I know God don't have to give me the answer, but if I worship God through all of this, God ought to say something. If I love God even in the midst of my wife divorcing me spiritually, I think God ought to give me some answers. But here's the problem. I keep on looking for God, and they told me that this God that I serve was omnipresent, present in my good, present in my bad, present in my ups, present in my downs. But I'm looking for God, but I cannot find him. That's what Job says to us. Well, here's the thing. In my search for answers, I have to always be conscious of the presence of God, even when I do not have the ability to engage the presence. I can't feel it. I can't see it. But I have to realize that it's there even when I'm uncomfortable in the there. You have to realize that just because I'm uncomfortable in my predicament does not mean that God has vacated the premises. Sometimes in the human predicament, the greatest expression of my devotion of God is seen when I can't feel God's presence. When I have the ability to stand right there in the moment and say, with all of these things I can't find any rational answers for, I still believe that you're somewhere on the scene. Even though I look for you even in my biblical text, because they told me that the word had an answer to everything, but I looked for you and I found you in the text, but I didn't find you in my predicament. I still believe that you're somewhere on the scene. Even though my family is looking all messed up right now and my health is not on the up, I can't find anything that gives me any remedy to my situation, but I still believe that you're somewhere on the scene. I looked in my prayer closet and I wasn't able to find you there, but I believe you're somewhere around here. I looked underneath my carpet where I brushed and I swept some of my dirty stuff because I believe that you're working on that, but I lifted it up and you weren't there, but I believe you're somewhere on the scene. I've been crying and I've been aching and I've been aching and I've been crying and I have hastened to your presence, but guess what? When I got to the place that I thought that you weren't there, you were somewhere else, and when I looked there for you, you weren't there either, but guess what? I believe that you're somewhere on the scene. I have been in a place where I just didn't like God, but the reason that I still stayed with God, even though I didn't like God, is that I believe that God was somewhere around here, even when I couldn't locate God. Here he said, I looked for God, but I could not find him. He says that I've been forward, wasn't able to behold him. He says, I looked on my right side, couldn't find him there. But look what he said. He says, I looked on my left where God was supposed to be. Why? Because my left is my hand of weakness. God is so much worried about my strengths. God is concerned with uplifting and building up my weaknesses. So I look where God was supposed to be working. And when I look for God on the job, God had left the job and had not even put in for leave. I didn't tell God to go anywhere. But God ain't there. I didn't tell God that he could get off early, but God not there. I didn't tell God that you could just leave me and forsake me. I've taken all of this, but I can't even connect with you when I need you the most. God ain't there. Why don't you just send me some answers to my question, even if I don't like what you tell me? If you say you gotta take it just because you mind, I may not like it, but tell me something. If you say because this is just the way it gotta be, tell me something. Why is heaven silent right now? Why will you not give any response to me when your child needs you the most? Folk are dying. The nation is in an uproar. The legislature is crazy. We got Hillary on one side, Trump on the other side. I've been a Republican for years, but I hate the fact that this stands as the reflection of my political party with such ignorance connected with such mess. It makes no sense to me, but give me some answers to my question. There is a people that stands in the need of nectar that only heaven can give to quench the hurt of the human soul, because if you don't respond, I'm going to die believing that the righteous God perhaps is is not righteous or just at all. But I hear a response to the question, and I hear an answer, but it does not come audibly, and it is not an answer that appears as answers so often do. Sometimes we have to be able to redeem the answers of God, even when God does not open up God's eternal mouth. How do we redeem the answers of God when God is not speaking in a way that I normally am able to hear God? Sometimes I got to hear God simply through my reflection of what God was yesterday. And I have to be able to live in the now of the residual of what God was then. Sometimes I have to be grounded in the fact that if God was God in the moment that I love God the most, that the same God that was present in green pastures is still present in my valley. Why? Because in the valley there has a shadow, and shadows cannot exist without light. It only testifies to the transcendent nature of God. What does transcendence mean? That means that although I'm in a place now that I don't like, God is present with me, even though I don't feel the presence. But guess what? God is already in my later while I'm hurting in my now. And I have to be able to testify of the supremacy of God in the place that I don't like God, acknowledging God's presence even though my flesh is not aware of it, knowing that God is working in the place that I don't like, while God is already in the place that I'm trying to get to, anticipating my life. There's the shall be's of God, the to be's of God. And so this is what Job says. He says, I have my complaint, I want to present it, but God is nowhere to be found. God is not in the place that God is supposed to be, where God is usually working. But this is what Job comes to conclude as he is in search of answers, as you are in search of answers to the problems of your moment. This is what Job says to us. Job says, God knows the way that I take. How does God know the way that I take? Because God is the designer of the way. And even though I don't understand the path, God created it, and so therefore God has purposed it. There's purpose even in a land that does not seem to give a great harvest. There has to be the dependence on God even when I'm standing in a dry place. There's bitterness here now, but he says he knows the way that I take. Look, Job, do this for me. I know that we're in chapter 23, but go back to chapter 1. There was a man in the land of Uz. He was just, he was upright, and guess what? He gave you prosperity. Is that not the same God who's God in chapter 23? And if the God in chapter 21 is provincially the God in chapter 23, what is my responsibility as I desire human answers to my problems, but also I need God to intervene in an eternal way? He knows the way that I take when he has tried me, when he has tested me. Abraham understands testing, and then I understand testing from this perspective, that one tests me, not in order to kill me, but one tests me in order to exercise my ability. And so my ability here is to stand in the acknowledgement of my faith. And so my faith, Job, is exercised here to be able to trust God in fullness in this dry place. God knows, and when God has gotten done with me, God in the purging transforms. When God has tested me and my faith has stood strong amidst the hurt, God says, now I can transform you into something new. You can never be anything great unless you endure the testing. Transformation comes with enduring. when they come to the top, the one who is transforming the gold into something that is beautiful comes and scrapes the impurities off the surface of the molten gold. Then he takes the gold after the impurities have been scraped from the surface, and he places the gold in a cool place. When he places the gold in a cool place, after the gold cools down, the gold metaphorically looks at itself in the mirror of eternity and says, I didn't know that I would ever look like this. Well, the reason that you look like gold now is because all of the stuff that I had you to go through, all of the stuff that I had you to sweat through, all of the stuff that I had you to pray through, all of the stuff that I had you to cry through, all of the answers that you were looking for, here it is. I had you to go through it, so at the end you'll come out looking like something of value and worth. Your testimony is that I did it so you could look like something that is reflective of me. I'm great, so now you can look great. I'm wonderful, now you can look wonderful. I'm marvelous, now you can look marvelous. And I'm not just doing it to you, Joe. I did it to somebody else. Look at my own child. I put on 2 plates of wood. I pierced him in his hand and I cut him at his side. I put him in a place that was a place of disgrace, but I transformed disgrace into something of triumph. It did not look like something of value while he was going through it, but at the end of it, when he comes up with all power, now when he looks for the answer, and the answer comes back, and it says, because now you have power that is not only for you, but it's power to liberate the masses, to make those that have not have something that they can walk with, that they can testify of. And then when the question is raised, how did you get to the place that you got to? It was only because there was something miraculous in the equation. And that was simple. That I was looking for God to do something. And I needed God to give me an answer. And at the end of it, I did not like everything that happened. But when I saw what God was going to reveal, I said, my God, Lord, forgive me. For if you would have never made me cry, I would have never been able to have the level of integrity I have now. Lord, forgive me. So if you never would have made me go through moments of rejection, I would have never been able to have a prophetic voice. Lord, forgive me. So if you never would have put me in a lonely place, I would have never been able to embrace your presence, even when I did not like the emotions that I was enduring at the moment. Lord, forgive me if you would have never made me have to walk alone. I would have never been able to try you, even when I didn't feel like trying you. Lord, forgive me. Here's my answer. I love you. 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 And the demonstration of full love is seen in moments of agony. And in the moments of agony, full victory and triumph is made manifest. And so it is God. It is God. It is God. Would you stand?